when you found out about Ralph?
You want the whole story?
Yeah.
Okay. I was on call that weekend. I was making rounds. I got a call that Ralph was very nauseous, could not get up, was very dizzy. They had gone to an urgent care center, and they told him that he may have some inner ear infection. He didn't feel any better to come back. Megan told me he got home and he was violently nauseous, and he was not getting any better. So I said, well, if this is not any better, I think he needs to come back, but bring him to the emergency room. I'm on call at South Miami Hospital. I'll make arrangements. Ralph was perfect in many ways and imperfect in many ways. And one of his imperfections was he was as stubborn as anything can be. Megan called me and said that Ralph had declined to go. So I went to his house. I had to go because I got called to an emergency. So I went back to the hospital, and about an hour later, Megan called me and said, no, he's worse. I said, okay, bring him in. We brought him in, and actually he had to be carried from the car in because he could barely walk because of the dizziness. So I came down to the emergency room. I called a good friend of mine, the neurologist, and initial examination, he felt that he may have benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, BPPV, but that he was going to get a CAT scan and he was going to get an appropriate evaluation just to be on the safe side. I never forget the ER physician, was very, very kind. Dr. Leanne Fernandez came and said, Dr. Garcia, we just finished the CAT scan, and she was very quiet. She didn't say much, and I said, well, here, let me show you. And she showed me the CAT scan, and there was this little haziness in the cerebellum. Neurologists would like to get an MRI. I said, sure, why not? During the CAT scan, I went inside the CAT scan suite in the control room just to see how he was doing, and he was laying perfectly still, no problems. I said, let's go get the MRI. When the MRI came back, it was very obvious it was a tumor there. And it was told to me by the neurologist. I had not told anybody. I had not told Ralph. I had not told Megan at that point. I remember walking the long hallway to his room. By that time, the neurologist met me there, and we talked to Ralph. I remember driving back. I had sent Pat, my wife, and the brothers home, and I got home, and I never forget that walk from my car to the house, and I said, Pat, our son has a cancer, and those were the hardest words I've ever had to say. Meanwhile, I was still on call, but luckily no other calls had come in, and I went back to the hospital, and then we met Megan in the bridge at South Miami Hospital between the towers. Her first words to us were, besides the tears, were, this isn't fair. And sure, to us at that time, it really didn't seem fair. And we walked in, we were there with Ralph, not saying much. And I just didn't know what to feel. I was so numb. I went home by myself. I left Pat and the brothers with Ralph and all the family members. And I sat in my recliner, just thought to myself, what would I do if it was a cardiovascular case? I review the objective data and see what my options are. And that's what I did. I started thinking about it as if it was a heart case. And I started making some phone calls. So the first phone call I made to a good friend whose husband worked at the University of Miami. And but before I made the second phone call, I had 2 phone calls came in and said, Ralph needs to be evaluated at the U. At that point, Nick, our third oldest, called and said, Nick, this is a story. It's typical Nick fashion. He researches everything, and he said, Dad, this is where we need to go to the university. We couldn't travel to Duke University because Megan was 7.5 months pregnant. It turns out that Dr. Rick Komatar, who came from also Sloan Kettering, but was also a Duke University graduate, was very familiar with a lot of the protocols. So he was, through the courtesy of my brother-in-law, who's was at that time the SICU nursing supervisor, and knew Dr. Komatar. Dr. Komatar welcomed us with open arms, and he said, I can help you take care of Ralph. So we transferred him. Remember, Ralph was smiling because his firefighter brothers had brought him a mermaid balloon. So, and that's how we went to the university. At the university, Dr. Komatar sat with us and said, look, it looks like it may be MS, But this is very strange the way it's presenting, especially given his age and where it was. Said there's still a possibility, could this be some type of an infective mass or something, you know, him diving into the water and grabbing something, you know. I even thought, you know, it was kind of strange for a parasite called Naegleria, because usually that's more frontal lobe, but I said, well, anything's possible. So after much deliberation, the neurosurgical team decided to do a lumbar spinal tap on Ralph. They set him up for a blood patch, a patch to seal where there may be a CSF leak that gives part of the headache. Well, Ralph unfortunately ate a banana on the day he was supposed to have his patch. So they were going to try to postpone it, and then between Saturday, his headache started intensifying, and then Megan called me between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday that his headache was the worst it ever been. So I called Dr. Comatar and he said, we'll do the patch now. And I went into the hospital. I told Pat, my wife, to come in later, and when I went there, I remember Megan and Ralph were getting ready to be put in the stretcher. Ralph had his head covered because the lights were bothering him. So I grabbed his hand and went down with him. I said, you know, I love you, son, and I said, I love you, Dad, and those were the last words I spoke with him. He went in to do the patch procedure. When they sat him up in the procedural table to do the patch, and the anesthesiologist was ready to do it, he went out, and that was it. He bled into the brain, and that was the end. They took him to emergency surgery, and there were a lot of, quote, mitoses, which are evidence that a lot of cancer cells, and it was a glioblastoma grade 4, which gives him about 6 months to a year of expectant life. Dr. Comatar came up to me and said, look, this is where he bled. If I don't see any resolution in this area, this conversation of rehab and talking to him and what to expect is going to be mute. That means he won't have a recovery. I had not told Megan at that point. Megan came in and said, I want to know everything. And so Rick and I sat with her and we went through the whole process. And then we waited. The next morning, we came in real early. Megan told us, well, he has no reflexes. And I said, well, but is he going to be, you know, weaned off sedatives? And I says, well, he's been off any medications for more than 12 hours. And so perhaps the most dramatic conversations that took place about organ donation, because Ralph was an organ donor, and I wanted to see if he could donate his heart, but the neurologist found a slight reflex, and he said he would have to wait another 5 days or 7 days before he could make a decision. As a family, and plus from a medical standpoint, I was concerned about the risk of infection on the other organs that he could donate. So we made a decision that he donate his kidneys and his liver, and we call it at that point. And so they took him to the OR, and in the OR they harvested the organs and declared him dead about 6:48 in the evening.
Where were you?
We were all together as a family in a very quiet room in one of the top floors at the University of Miami hospital, and we were gathered together and we just embraced. Rick Comatar came up and he was crying. It was very, very powerful scene, and that was it. And I had a friend of mine, a vascular surgeon, who offered to go down and be my representative during the time. I wanted to go, but they didn't let me go to the OR where he was. So they didn't allow family members. So that was it.
How often do you think about Ralph?
Are you kidding me? Every day. Every single minute that I can. There's so many things that remind us of him. One of the hardest things Pat, my wife, had to do was go through his things at home. From, you know, we'd never gone back to his room after we found that letter from Harvard, you know, stuck in a drawer that he never told us about, and I had to confront him with it. But all the stuff, we have you know, I call Freddie because we have a brand new a fire jacket, what do you call it, overcoat that he never used. Giving away his T-shirts. All his cousins wanted his T-shirts because they want to wear something that Ralph had. We all wanted a piece of Ralph. and that's that's what we've done. He's everywhere, and it's interesting you mentioned that. We went to see The Shape of Water yesterday with Nick. We had not seen it. This poem at the end really struck me, this very little paragraph. It said, "Unable to perceive the shape of you, I find you all around me. Your presence fills my eyes with your love. It humbles my heart, for you are everywhere." And I think that Ralph is everywhere. I really do. And I think that if I could just embrace a firefighter, be it him or her, and say, look, take care of yourself.